Now, in your excellent column, I read it this morning, page 21 of the Times today, it's a must read. So if you've got the copy of the Times, you've got the app, then do read Patrick's column. You talk about Keir Starmer, you draw comparisons between Keir Starmer's election campaign earlier this summer and what Kamala Harris is trying to do, particularly around how they both have tackled the thorny issues of immigration. Do you think there's a genuine effort from Team Harris to look at the success that Keir Starmer has had in dealing with what are quite difficult issues for the left and trying to bring that into her own campaign to be president?
Yes, I think that is definitely what's happening. If you listen to Kamala Harris, in every one of her speeches now, she talks about smashing transnational smuggling gangs and people trafficking gangs as a prosecutor in California. Now, as you say, migration is one of the perennially difficult issues for the Democrats in the US, just as immigration is for Labour in the UK. And as I write in my column this morning, Starmer's team, the team behind Joe Biden, and now the team behind Kamala Harris have spent the past 4 or 5 years meeting up with each other at international conferences, meeting in DC, meeting in London, and they see their mission as a shared one. So what's happening is on big thorny questions like growth, where Labour has taken its cues from the Biden administration, on migration, where the Harris campaign is taking its cues from Starmer, you're seeing them develop a shared language that is not afraid to confront these very, very difficult issues for the centre-left. And it's no coincidence that they are saying the same things because they're being advised by the same people and they see their campaign against the populist right as they see it as one and the same.
Can we just start with the infected blood scandal? Of course, Labour has decided to honour its pledge to provide lifetime support to those affected by this. Run us through the offer, if you could, and the timings on when victims can expect to receive money into their bank accounts.
So, of course, the size of the payouts given to victims depends on individual circumstances. Lots of people, to the extent that the government is going to be paying billions in compensation, will get individual one-off compensation payments. They could top £2 million in the most severe cases. But what's been announced today that's new as a result of Sir Robert Francis's inquiry into the scandal are lifetime support payments paid annually on top of that to some of the worst hit victims. That includes an extra £15,000 for those who went to a school called Turola College in Hampshire, where children were given high-risk medical treatments in order to research haemophilia, and £10,000 for those who were used for medical research without their knowledge. So that's on top of already quite substantial payments of compensation.
Now, the victims can never be happy. They can never be content. This was a scandal that, rocked the government and has, it took so long for it all to come out. But to the extent that they can be satisfied with this compensation, are they? And, can we now start to move on, do you think, or we'll try to move on from this very, very dark chapter?
Well, the short answer, Theo, I think is no. Factor 8, who have a campaign group of victims who've been campaigning on this, and also the families of those affected, have welcomed this morning's announcement. But they say victims still know too little about what they're entitled to. They say there's no one document that clearly sets out who's entitled to what. And Richard Warwick, from the boarding school in Hampshire I mentioned, said the £15,000 a year figure is derogatory and insulting, his words, because these were children, of course, who were effectively experimented on without their knowledge and infected for life. So it's a pretty mixed reaction. It does sound from those reactions this morning that the government will be contending with this for quite some time yet, even after payments have begun.
Moving on to another very contentious issue, public sector pay. The GPs are now asking for an 11% pay rise. This comes off the back of train drivers receiving 14%. Are there any concerns in the Treasury about where these public sector pay hikes are going to end?
I think there is definitely an awareness that you encourage the others, I won't use the French at this time in the morning, by giving out these pay deals. But what Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has said that, yes, look, this is a big outlay of taxpayers' money, but the cost to the economy is bigger if you don't deal with these things. The risk, though, is that there is no such thing as a one-off payment to a trade union, as Labour governments learned in the 1970s. So that's the risk for the Labour Party, particularly, as you say, now the GPs and other public sector unions. The RMT, Mick Lynch, following ASLEF, the train drivers union this morning, saying he wants exactly the same deal. So there is a risk there, but Labour are justifying it on the grounds that everything is about economic growth, and these strikes hurt economic growth. And this morning as well, there has been signs from senior economists that the economic inheritance isn't quite as bad as it may have looked. Economy's grown by 1.3% in the past 2 quarters of this year. So maybe Rachel Reeves will have more room for manoeuvre at the budget anyway.
Has somebody actually done the sums on this in terms of, the cost to the economy of the strikes continuing versus the public sector pay hike?
I don't think they've done that
There's
with
not a
reference
sheet
to
of
these
paper
deals.
or somewhere.
No. There will be that sheet of paper that exists somewhere in the Treasury. And the great irony, of course, is that was always what Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary who lost his seat, the former Tory Cabinet Minister, would say, look how much these strikes cost for the economy. So Labour in government are using that logic to justify what the Tories refuse to do.
And of course, at the same time, we have Caroline Abrahams from Age UK. She's on the front page of The Times this morning saying that pensioners feel as though they're being treated as a lower priority. Is there recognition in Downing Street that it is politically dangerous to be going down this route, or are they just prepared to ride it out?
There is a recognition that there are trade-offs involved here. Look at also the cut to the winter fuel allowance, but also I think there is definitely a deliberate strategy in Downing Street to give Gen X, millennials, whatever you want to call them, people who aren't claiming their pensions, a bit of something from the economy as well. I think that's been a hallmark of Tory governments, wasn't it, to serve their pensioner base. And the Labour government is quite deliberately not pursuing that strategy. So I think they're aware of the trade-off, but that's the politics they've chosen.
Let's talk about Ian Caulfield and Emily Middleton. Household names they are not, but they find themselves at the heart of a cronyism row involving Labour, not the Tories. Could you just expand?
So Ian Caulfield, donor to Rachel Reeves, he's a banker. He's just been hired as a director at the Treasury, as a civil servant, not necessarily as a political appointment. Emily Middleton, a tech expert who was seconded to the Labour Party. Her former employer, Public Digital, donated £67,000 to the Labour Party, and she's been hired as Director General at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, working with Peter Kyle, who she was working with in opposition. Now, 2 people have just been hired to government jobs, but the difference is, as you know, Theo, civil service meant to be politically impartial. They're meant to put these things out to open applications. Neither of those things have happened in this case, and this is causing a lot of consternation on the Tory side, precisely for the reason you say. It's a cronyism row. These are public appointments. These are political people. Yes, they may well abide by the Civil Service Code and be impartial from now on, but the nature of the appointments is such that it's led to accusations that Labour are using what are meant to be public appointments that aren't subject to sort of political favouritism for that reason.
Is it a case of rank hypocrisy? Because think back to the Boris Johnson at the end of his days. Labour are hopping up and down about cronyism and appointments and gifts or whatever to contracts, particularly the VIP lane when it came to COVID contracts. Is this a case that actually is Labour is just sort of whilst the Tories are weak, are just sort of carrying on where the Tories left off?
Yes, I think that is the case. They're certainly vulnerable to that charge of hypocrisy. What they say is, especially in Caulfield's case, the money involved is relatively small. He donated £5,000. They say his role was limited to helping organise a business conference. But even so, if the Tories were doing this, that's a good rule in politics. If your opponents were doing it, what would you say? And if you would be hammering them every day on Times Radio, then perhaps you shouldn't be doing it. But something else I hear from Tories on this is quiet admiration that Labour are, as you say, striking while the iron is hot and pushing these appointments through while basically nobody else is looking. They sort of envy the slight ruthlessness and an appetite to do that sort of thing.